Well, hey there, everyone. Welcome again to another edition of Practically MP. Man, hope wherever you're tuning in from that you are well. And, we just can't thank you enough for continuing to be a part of some of the conversations and particularly this conversation. We've been processing the heavy and the painful and the messy matter of racial tension and racial division that has vividly resurfaced in our nation, and we're just wrestling through this. How do we enter in and play our part in you know the solution for equality and justice and healing? And just especially thankful that you are a part of this conversation, because what we do know is we cannot afford to stop having this conversation.
Mhm.
And so we want to be a part of the messiness, and we again are super grateful for those of you who are a part of this as well. Man, thankful to have my friend Matt Deuel on this right on this episode again as we've continued to process. And let me just say this really quickly before we move on. We are not experts. We are so thankful that we get to be a part of this conversation, but
Yeah.
gosh, we are super aware of the fact that we are not experts in any regard. We're just a couple of guys who deeply long to be part of a better story. So
Yeah.
we are going to continue to do what we can to invite um, this conversation. Passionate, humble. I trust we'll stay as we ask what our part is in this conversation. So, hey, thank you so much for being with us. Matt, thanks so much for being a part of this conversation. Joretta, good morning. Joel, good morning. Margaret, good morning. Thanks for jumping in. But Matt, how are you doing?
Man, thanks, Kondo. It's good to be here. And at the same time, I feel like I could throw up because I agree, man. Not an expert at this. And, I continue to, process with my wife just how in the world have I found myself in the middle of some of these conversations. But I think really, truly, at the end of the day, it comes back to some of our initial conversations a month or so ago of just us connecting as friends and just processing some of what we were seeing and feeling in the world. And so, yeah, as I think it's becoming, it feels like it's becoming a little bit harder and a little more intimidating to be live on the internet, expressing thoughts and statements about the racial tension in our world, because we certainly don't want to be misinterpreted or say the wrong thing, which, certainly capable of doing that. So I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that today, but yeah, I'm coming today grateful again for the opportunity to have the conversation, but certainly with a heavy heart as it feels like there is just continuing to be a lot going on in the world. At the same time, I also feel like we're living in a truly different and historic moment of change, and the privilege we have to be a part of that is incredible. So man, how about you? How are you processing? It's been a couple of weeks since we've done this Facebook live chat. How are you feeling? What are you processing? What are you seeing from your perspective going on in the world?
Yeah, it's heavy, man. I mean, my heart is heavy. I feel the hurt of this season, and yet definitely hopeful. Danielle, good morning, by the way. Emily, good morning. Thank you guys again for being a part of this conversation. But I do feel a strange hopefulness that just won't let go, that won't go away. There's something, I mean, even if you take away what I believe our God is doing in this season. Um, there's just something, like you said, historic, and there's something different about this season. And I don't know. I mean, I think there's some, potential reasons for that. I've been processing what is it about this, this episode in our lifetime that feels different. And I do think there are a number of those things. One of them, I think, is social media,
Hmm.
where conversations and perspectives that were previously relegated behind closed doors are now being posted. So
Yeah.
what people think and what people feel is kind of out there a little bit more. And there's beauty to that, by the way, because it is hard to heal what's happening in the shadows. But when things are exposed and brought into the light, there's something about that. So I'm thankful for that, even though some of the stuff that's surfaced is hard to see, and it's heavy, and it's some of it is ugly, some of it is pretty beautiful, but I'm thankful that it's kind of out there. Man, I think the pandemic has also been a factor in this historic moment, because if nothing else, people already kind of tense it and restless and almost in fight mode, if you know what I mean, like assigning fault. Whose fault is it? And our weapons were already out.
Yeah.
But I think also beyond that, um, there's something powerful, I think, that happened in the pandemic, in the sense that people who are normally on the go and
Hmm.
who may be prone to just kind of disengage things, and things end up being kind of background noise, were quarantined and unusually tethered to their devices, if that makes sense, and so they saw consecutive visuals of some pretty horrific things, and I think it kind of raised this new awareness, particularly in the white community, because I think we all saw while we were sitting. We weren't rushing, we weren't going anywhere, and we had an opportunity to say, "Whoa, this would have kind of scrolled by in the past, but now I'm sitting, I'm in my house or wherever, and it just a little bit different." So it's been painful to see all of this stuff on social media and to see all of these painful incidences in the news. But there's a little bit of hope, because I think people are seeing, and man, it's been amazing to hear people's voices being raised in response uh, to what to what they're seeing. So, man, it's been heavy for me. It's been difficult, but man, I cannot neglect to say it feels hopeful still. Like this is going somewhere. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, anything of particular concern? I mean, right now. I mean, obviously there was another shooting in Atlanta that involved a black man and a white police officer. We continue to see protests around the world. We continue to see, a variety of statements from different people. What's standing out to you right now in terms of just things of concern?
Um Gosh, man. So yeah, we saw another death of a black man at the hands of a white officer in Atlanta, and man, that was just really, really painful to see. And gosh, I grieve for Rayshard's um, family. I
Mhm.
can't imagine again what that experience is like for them. Um, and gosh, you talk about how difficult it's getting to have these conversations. Um, the concern for me, I think that's just stirred me, is I am seeing the temptation for us to say, "Oh, here we go again," you know,
Mm,
like another one. It's
mm,
just another one. Just add this to the list. And that's feels dangerous to me when we stop pausing long enough to ask questions about each situation. And it's tempting to just say, like, oh, another one of those things that was incentivized by this, or was motivated by that, or it was covered up by this. And so we just kind of throw it in a pile. And it just, we start to respond to it just really, really, really emotionally without pausing and saying, no, Rayshad Brooks is one man. His family is grieving the loss of a man. What happened in this situation? Can we enter in and have the difficult conversation about what happened in Atlanta versus the temptation to just say, oh, another black guy at the hands of an officer who did it for this reason? And when we say this conversation gets messy, I also think that means we cannot just emotionally react to everything the same way. I wouldn't want that to happen to me. I would hope that people would take my story as my story, not just lump it in with the stories of so many other people, and that people would treat my situation as my situation. And so that to me has been really, it's been really heavy to kind of
Yeah.
watch people again weaponizing the grief of a family, and then categorizing an officer, which I cannot do, man. I don't know this man. I don't know all that happened
Yeah.
in the situation. There were a lot of mitigating circumstances around this. But so anyway, all that to say, it's just a little bit heavy in realizing that there's a great temptation for people to just say, man, here we go again. Here's another situation, and just lump it right in, which I don't know is that's going to be entirely um, constructive. I don't know if that makes sense or what you're processing as
Yeah.
that's kind of come across the news waves.
Yeah. No, I really, man, I really appreciate the way that you just process that out of, because here for me, I would say it's as I have, worked to try and understand all the circumstances and evidence that are available to us right now as it concerns Rayshad Brooks. My heart's still broken. My heart is broken that someone died, that a black man died at the hands of a white police officer. That's heartbreaking, period. And so it my heart connects to some of the feelings I had when I saw the video of Ahmaud Arbery being murdered. And yet those two stories and those two individuals are entirely different. Just like you and I are different people, different circumstances. And so Rayshard Brooks, it's just insanely complicated to me to try and parse out all of the elements of that story as we know it, and to come to just some really strong blanket statement conclusions on social media. Because yeah, he was being investigated for a DUI, and according to the breathalyzer on the scene, he was over the legal limit. So should he have been arrested? Yes, I think he should have been arrested. As I watched the video, I just found myself begging him not to resist. Don't resist arrest. Please don't do this. And then as I see the officer draw his weapon and shoot him, I find myself begging, please don't shoot this man. And I just, my heart breaks over the situation. And yet I think what you are saying is really profound, of just to say it's another one and to throw it on a list or on a pile of circumstances and just bring them all collectively together. That feels hard. I mean, that feels hard to know how to process that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's I think we've talked about this before. these are very nuanced situations. And I think in our day and age, and with the tools at our disposal with the internet and social media, we sort of become these armchair experts on all of these situations that we are hundreds of miles removed from. Like you said, I don't know the officer. I don't know Rayshad Brooks. I see pieces of their lives now coming to me through social media. And some of those pieces I'm not even sure are 100% true, you know? So what do we do with that? How do we respond to that? Do we just say, oh, too hard, too complicated, don't know what to do with it, so sorry? Or any thoughts on how to engage it? Any thoughts on how to continue to move the conversation forward of what it means to fight racial injustice without doing this lumping everything together? Because man, as profound as I think that thought is, I'm not sure what to do with it.
Yeah. I don't know. We talked about this at church on Sunday, and you're aware of this, that for me, I just think, especially those who are followers of Jesus Christ, we've got to lead with compassion. And we've got to start with compassion. Like a man lost his life. And that is heartbreaking. And Matt, I will say, I do not think Rayshad Brooks should have died.
Agreed.
I do not think Rayshad Brooks should have died.
Yeah, absolutely.
That man should still be living right now.
Yes.
And and I know you think the same thing, and you said you said so. That man should still be alive today. It was this messy and painful thing to watch, and the same thing. So here's the nuanced conversation, and so I think we have to be willing to have these really painful conversations. Meaning, I watched a man die who should not have died. I watched a man who attempted for a while to cooperate and to be as disarming and agreeable as possible. I watched. This is again my perspective.
Yeah.
Which again, if I do not leave room to say what you said, which is I don't know all of the mitigating circumstances, but what I saw was a man who should not have died. What I saw, same as you, was a guy who I was saying, if that were my son, I would be begging him, do not resist. Do not resist. You've done so great. Don't resist. Don't give any reason. Okay. Yet you want to go another layer? Then another part of me says, you watched what happened to George Floyd. So you don't resist, but that does not, in your mind, whether he's wrong or right, I can understand a guy who's saying, okay, so if I don't resist, then man, there's nothing that protects me. So man, my best bet is to fight and try and run in light of what I've seen. So then compassion understands that side as well, So I know I'll tell my son, don't resist, and then pray, oh, God, help him to be safe, because I've seen visuals that would make me just feel a little bit like, I hope cooperation works in your favor. I mean, we are just weeks away from watching this happen with George Floyd. Then on the other hand, if some of the information about Rayshad Brooks' past is true, if there's a warrant out for his arrest, or if this happens, he's going back to jail. If he gets arrested, then that's a strike in his. Then that's another layer or another circumstance that's going on. And people are so complex. And this is my point, Matt. if there is that, he may be wrestling through that. And then the guy is not in his right mind. We know he's over the legal limit.
Yeah.
So how clearly is he thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you throw in, I saw a man handcuffed and cooperate and die. Um, man, if I get arrested, I'm going to jail. You know, I may not be thinking completely clearly in this situation, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's messy, right? Let's go to the other side. And this is where I think people would struggle with us having a layered conversation. Like, and it's brutal to me. It feels almost just hard to have a conversation about a man whose family is in the throes of grief,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I pray we as a church will never forget this is a guy and his family is heartbroken regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the layers. They lost a son, a dad. That's just painful.
Yeah. Yeah.
um but there's also layers with Officer Rolf, right? Like, he is in really quick time thinking about what he's doing. So
Mm-hmm.
what I would say is he should never have shot that man in the back.
Mm. Yeah.
But what's going on in his mind, I don't think it would be fair to jump to a conclusion and say that this is a racist cop who was out to just kill a black man on that day. Like, if we say that, then I think honestly we contribute to the problem of assigning motive to individuals, whereas that motive may have been fair for somebody else, right? So, man, in real time, you're wrestling on the ground. A guy gets up, he pulls something, and he points it in your direction. I think we all think that somebody's going to think real time. No, that's a taser. Okay, that's not a this. It's dark. It's everything is
Right.
moving really fast at this point.
Yeah.
What's the guy thinking? I don't know. I know he should never have shot the man who's running away from him.
Yeah.
So, Matt, you and I could both be completely wrong about everything we just said. But I think the point is that I pray that when we say, let's learn to pause and listen to each other, we mean that. Even when every emotion in me is angry and broken and I am yelling, that man should not have died.
Yeah.
That man, let the guy go. You have his car, you have his
Right.
info.
Right.
Track him down.
Yeah.
But I also get in the heat of the moment all the crazy things um, that can happen. I will say, you know, um, yeah, it's the messy layers become really, really, really hard to enter into. So, um, yeah, Matt. Bottom line is, I would say, um, this guy should not have died.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there
Mm-hmm.
were a lot of circumstances that went into it, and I pray for the humility and the perspective to be angry and to still in the midst of my anger be willing to listen, because that's what James tells us, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
He says, hey, be slow to speak, be quick to listen, be
Yeah.
slow to become angry. And I feel like I'm always mixing those. I'm very quick to anger, then I'll say something, and then finally I'll listen. And I just think, um, I want to learn the balance of that. All right, I'm going to pause for a second and read some of what you all are saying.
Yeah.
Um, Daniel Allen, just so you know, I love you. In case there was any question um, about that. Uh, Gosh, and I do want to say this, that for me, um, man, as a black man, I don't think we should live with the pressure of even saying it's a sellout every time we listen. It's not
Yeah.
selling out, it's being part of the solution.
Yeah.
It's, I will, it is not an abandonment for you, Matt, to to listen to what your Black brothers and sisters are saying, even in the midst of your personal frustration or anger. But it can almost feel that way. Like, man, if you even pause for a second and consider the possibility that Garrett was not a racist, he may have been a rookie, amateur, bad decision, terrible under pressure. Is there that possibility? If there's just no possibility except he targeted this man,
Right.
we will perpetually just have an us and them and an us and them. And anytime something happens involving two races, we will pit them against each other and widen the divide.
Right. Yeah.
That guy made a mistake. He was wrong for what he did. And I would like to hear what he has to say, because I've not heard it yet.
Yeah.
But based on the response right afterwards, he is breathing really heavy. Another officer is talking to him, and he continues to ask, can somebody give me an update on the state of Mr. Brooks? Can somebody give me an update on the state of Mr. Brooks? And they tell him, well, have you called your wife? Not yet. Can somebody give me an update on the state of Mr. Brooks?
Yeah.
There is, at least what we know is, he is not saying, yo, got another Black man, right? Made some terrible mistakes, some wrong choices in the midst of everything.
Yeah.
But I still want to be willing to listen and enter into the layers, Matt. But I'm gonna let you speak to this.
No, I appreciate what you said of just the we don't know Rayshad Brooks. We don't know Officer Rolfe. We don't know all of the circumstances. We know what we've seen. And yes, 100% agreed. Rayshad Brooks should not have died. He should not be dead. And I could not agree with that or state that more. But I think something you just said reminded me of something I read yesterday. Somebody posted this online, and I'm just going to read it really quick. When you debate a person about something that affects them more than it affects you, remember that it will take a much greater emotional toll on them than on you. For you, it may feel like an academic exercise. For them, it feels like revealing their pain only to have you dismiss their experience and sometimes their humanity. The fact that you might remain more calm under these circumstances is a consequence of your privilege, not increased objectivity on your part. Stay humble. And I think that meant so much to me because A, I'm not a Black man. B, I'm not a law enforcement officer. So as I enter into this situation and this set of circumstances, I don't know what it's like on either side of the conversation. And so for me, as a white man bystander, to enter in with any sort of just, I know exactly what to say about this and what this means and how I should respond. To me, that is some of the problem and some of what distresses me as I, look on social media and as I read through things and I see some of the argument and some of the back and forth, that it feels like there's such a commitment to argue every element of racial injustice away. That we're lacking this humility. We're lacking this humility of what it means to sit down with our friends of color, to sit down with law enforcement officers, to sit down with the very people who are involved in these really hard circumstances, and just to listen, just to be slow to speak and just to listen. And so yeah, Kondo, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your willingness to process some of this. And you know me, man, I'm not short on opinions, but I am just praying that God would just give me more and more and more humility as it comes to this conversation, because I'm just finding my lack of real experience in terms of what the lens that you view these things through. It's calling me more and more to just say, help me understand, help me process this. So I do appreciate that.
No, that's meaningful, and that's where I man, I long to be. Is I want to listen, and I want to hear, and I want to understand. I want to start with compassion. Gosh, I don't know if Officer Rolf was married,
Mm,
but if he is, I can imagine what this is like for his wife. I can imagine what this is like for his family. And the moment we start to dehumanize, and that to me is what I feel like is happening. We are politicizing this issue and we're demonizing people.
mm,
So even now, instead of saying we lost a man died and his family is grieving, and a law enforcement officer was responsible for it, and now he is under an immense amount of, you know, scrutiny and condemnation and all of those things. I don't know, Matt. We've got to labor to humanize this situation. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. Versus to politicize it, which is what I feel is happening. And I felt it. You felt it. That if I make a statement that Black Lives Matter, they're just people waiting to say, okay, so you must be, oh, you're on the left
mm-hmm.
and you are supporting this organization that stands for this and this and this and this and this and this. How dare you? You know,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's like, wow. So we moved away from humanizing to now what I would consider to be politicizing. You know, if you say that, then man, uh, a black man died. Well, let's rush to find out all the things he did wrong. Why? What will that do? Why? Well, because if we can find out how bad a guy he was, then we can demonize and then we don't have to care about him. And then we justify the fact that he died, right? If
Mm,
we can find something about, well, it's a police officer, it's a law enforcement officer. So, of course, he shot him in the back. I don't have to care who this man is. I don't have to care who his family is because I've categorized him bad guy, good guy, bad guy. So, some of us are going after the police officers. Let's just indict all of them because they're all demons.
yeah,
Let's go after the minority community and let's find out the way there was single dad, families or single mom families, dads that abandoned them. Let's go and find out the way. Oh, they were not a good guy. It's so wrong. Like, stop
yeah.
politicizing. And it's also hypocritical, by the way, Matt. Now I'm getting carried away, and you knew this was bound to happen. Because there have been people who've said that to me. They've said, so when you say Black Lives Matter, man, do you realize what you're bringing into the church? I'm trying to humanize, you know, um, to me, the value of the Black life.
Mm,
I do not, to me, versus like, oh man, this organization, what it stands for. And here's the thing, and this is as debating as I'll get. Um, if I showed you um, footage from Access Hollywood, um, and I told you, do you know what such and such an individual represents? If I showed you emails from a server and I show this is what this, will that affect who you vote for in November?
mm,
Right? So it's really interesting that we have become like, if you say something that is associated with something else, then it's, man, you just throw the whole thing out. And I'm like, but that's not how you vote, right? You vote for people who have done some things that are documented. So does that mean you should, come on, man? That to me is a double standard. It's a
yeah,
double, show me how you vote and let's see what we can pull up on your candidate.
yeah,
And will you not get behind them? Right? So for me, it just feels like it's a lot of politicizing and parsing for the sake of, you know. So show me your candidate, show me who you voted for, and let's see what evidence. So it's just, I feel like there's just a lot of work to demonize or a lot of work to politicize. If you say white privilege, then you must be here. If you say law enforcement, you must be here. If you say Black Lives Matter, you must be here. And all of these conversations are happening on Facebook or on YouTube, which is, what does, you know, I don't endorse everything Mark Zuckerberg stands for, but I
Yeah.
do use Facebook. So anyway, I know I'm getting carried away. I think the point for me is I just hope there'll be a labor to continue to humanize people, not to politicize and put them in a camp. Because if Rayshad Brooks was a criminal, therefore, if Officer Wolf is an officer, therefore, and I just think we slow down our willingness to listen, um, and yet we only apply that incriminating of individuals when it suits us. So, um,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think with all of that, there is a growing intimidation of what it means to be an active participant in this conversation.
yeah,
I think it's becoming increasingly more difficult to know what it means to have a voice that isn't going to get your life canceled by cancel culture. Like, oh, you said the wrong thing, or you said one thing, and therefore you mean everything, and so I'm no longer listening to you. You're not a valid voice. And we saw this happen with a pastor on Sunday, a white man who was having a conversation in the context of a sermon moment with a black man, another white man, and he made a statement that was just dumb. I mean, it just was. And yet, do I think he meant what he said? I don't know. Again, I don't know, but I think that it's, he apologized and he said, I'm so sorry, but the apology's not good enough. And so cancel, he's out. He doesn't get to participate in the conversation. And I think that's really difficult. I think that's really difficult to say, man, we as humans, if we're not able to just parse everything out perfectly and communicate every aspect of the entire conversation, then we shouldn't be having the conversation, because it's too flawed. That doesn't feel like progress. That feels like a pendulum swing in the other direction. So man, I'm curious for you, Kondo. What does it mean to you that, I mean, I saw here somebody's questioning, are we willing to make a statement about racism against white people right now? I would say in this moment, in this point in history, and what we're talking about, our friends of color, our Black brothers and sisters, are needing attention. And so, yeah, we're focusing the conversation on that. But do we care about white people who are experiencing racism? Yes, we do. Of course we do. And I think that just reveals some of the complexity of it, can we have a conversation focusing in on the area of need, on the area that feels to be like it's suffering the most right now? Kind of, what would you say on the just the intimidation factor, because you, by the way, I'm just grateful and proud of you as a friend. You have made, through these conversations and Practically MP, you're right along with Sheriff Dukes last week, through Sunday sermons, man, you have really committed to put yourself out there in a lot of these conversations and a lot of these thoughts, and I'm so grateful for it. And yet, man, I realize there's a cost for you in doing that and being willing to be very forward-facing in some of your feelings and thoughts. So what would your thoughts and encouragement be to some of us, and just engaging the conversation and not letting some of the fear and some of the intimidation take over?
Yeah, my wife doesn't think it's super smart. No, I'm kidding. That's, I'm telling you, Matt, I want to be on the right side of history, and I want to be on the right side of heaven. So let me, even in light of, I can see some of the comments. I appreciate you drawing my attention to that. I am I don't want to, yeah, I don't think we should enter into these, be bullied or pushed into false dichotomies. I felt that a lot, you know, right? Because if you say this, it means this. So I want to even make very clear, I personally do not endorse the Black Lives Matter organization. Um, and yet I believe the phrase Black Lives Matter is incredibly significant right now, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Let me go to the other side, right? Um, I realize I'm not answering your question. I'm probably engaging some of what I see.
That's okay.
I do not, and I said this to you, I've said this to a friend of mine named Drew. I won't say his last name because he and I have argued with this. I don't I don't like it when I hear minorities indicting white people with the phrase white privilege.
Hmm.
Um, I'm curious to know from you if you would speak to that at some point. But you know, I don't. I The fact that you, Matt, were born white and you were born with certain privileges is not a crime. I don't
Hmm.
think you should ever have to apologize for that.
Hmm.
Um, I do think it gives you a platform that you can use. I was born in a context, and now I live in a context where I am just wealthier than the majority of people in the world. That's not a crime. I'm not going to apologize for the fact that, but it does give me a platform. It does give me some power. It does give me some resources. And I think heaven is going to ask, how did I steward the resources I had? How did I steward the blessings I had? How did I steward the privileges that I had? But so I think, man, the fact that, and I do think that's a lot of what happens. There's a lot of wounds in the community of color right now. And what seems to happen is because we are talking about that, people are saying, if you talk about that, it means you don't care about your wife who's white. Whoa, 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 whoa.
Hmm.
Uh, no, it's just we can't have all the conversations at the same time. In fact, I think to try and do that has a way of almost, you know, man, honey, I want you to know I love you, and I love your mom, and I love my brother, and I love my sister. No, when I'm on date night with my wife, there is a focus to my love and what I'm talking about. It doesn't mean I dismiss or think she's more valuable than other people. So I don't want people to break into my date nights and tell me, like right now, you are showing a little too much favoritism for this. This must mean you think she's more valuable. Well, in certain ways, I do, but I think, Matt, you get my point. The pressure to almost do what I'm doing right now, like where it's like, if I say this, let me balance it out by saying what I also don't believe. Or if I say this, then let me parse out all the things that I believe on the other side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is this calling for diplomacy when we're in a season of desperation.
Hmm.
There's a time for diplomacy. And there's a time to tell you everything we believe about all the people in the world. But man, right now, the scathing wound is in the Black community. Um, but even then, if I hear people of, you know, my skin color saying things about white people or saying things about this, that, and the other, it is my responsibility as a follower of Jesus Christ to say, whoa, 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 racism is wrong. It's not just wrong when it comes from one race going in another direction. It is wrong regardless of who it comes from. But to focus on the people who are hurting the most is not racist.
Hmm.
It's just love.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would say, yeah, as we enter in, I am feeling more and more fearful. Uh, and more like, man, this is messy. Like, let's get out of here. Which
Right.
is why I think people stop having the conversation, because everything you say pegs you in one direction or the other. Everything you say is, well, but you didn't say all the other things that you meant, or all the other things that you believe. I'm like, I'm just talking about the Chicago Bulls right now. I'm not talking about football. I'm not talking about hockey. I'm not talking about tennis, greatest sport on earth. I'm just talking about this thing right now. I could talk to you about that when we're talking. So I think we have to be willing to step in and address the pain that's happening right now. Um, you know, in my mind, I think, you know, and yes, Ed, I agree. That was a bad example. I'm not sure which one, probably about my wife. Yes, that illustration breaks down. I get it. But again, that's part of the tension. I think my point is, I just hope there'll be courage and humility in the church to continue to step out. It's been a powerful thing to see, especially my white brothers and sisters stepping out and speaking up. Um, and I pray that if there is a disproportionate wound, like I said to you, Matt, a couple of conversations ago, in the white community, I pray that the minority community will stand up and will rally alongside, just to say, man, we care, we're with you, we love you. So
Hmm.
um, it's a messy conversation, and I know you and I wrestled even yesterday. Like, man, you realize to continue to step in these contexts puts a target,
Sure.
um, as an individual. If you have these conversations in your family, it may put a target, because people want to put you in one camp or the other. Are you saying this or are you saying that? Are you here or are you there? Are you pro cop or are you pro black person? Forgive the French. Shut up. I refuse to have to choose.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't have to choose between those two things. Um, and I think it's part of the reason why, so I would say to you, be rebellious in the sense that don't let somebody tell you, well, oh, then you must be this because,
Yeah.
just continue to have the conversations and be willing to listen, and let's be humble, and let's, man, lead with compassion, but let's not quit, because it's going to be really, really tough, you know. Um, it's really going to be tough to continue this in 3 weeks. I'm just telling you right now.
Right.
And so we want to continue to press forward. I'll be on vacation next week, so we're not going to have this particular conversation, but want to continue to press in. Last thing, this was supposed to be 30 minutes, but here we are again. Matt,
Sure.
what I'm curious to know on your end, because I know what it sounds like when I hear it. It sounds like an indictment. What do you hear when you hear the word or the words white privilege?
Yeah.
A
Um,
compliment, a condemnation? What do you hear?
sure. No, I would say I think that phrase, white privilege, I think it really came on my radar around 2014, and I think it was around Michael Brown's killing in Ferguson, where I feel like I started to hear that more and more. And I would say initially there was confusion for me, and there was defensiveness for me of feeling like, wait, what? Like I had nothing to do with this. And as someone who follows Jesus, I strive to love everybody, and I don't have and I try to use my my influence and my resources to help other people. And so I think there was a defensiveness. And I know a lot of my white brothers and sisters, they feel a sense of defensiveness
Yeah.
for that saying. And I think that's this pastor this past Sunday, they got in some hot water. I think he was trying to do some verbal gymnastics to redefine the phrase, almost to make it more palatable or more easy for us to understand. And I think that's where he tripped up. And the thought that I saw, and it just sort of was just kind of this really simple, like, got it. and it just lowered the what felt like the pressure or the temperature on the statement is, white privilege does not mean your life hasn't been hard. It means your skin color isn't one of the things that makes it harder. And I think that idea just resonated with me. And so, you know, as I process my life, and Kondo, as you and I have had, you know, many conversations about our lives and our kids and some of the different circumstances and things that they face, what I'm becoming more and more aware of is that my white privilege is that my skin tone is not the thing that makes my life harder. It's just not. And it doesn't mean that there aren't people that don't have racial feelings towards white people, but the circumstances of my life have not been dictated by the fact that I am white. It hasn't affected me trying to get a job anywhere. It hasn't affected the pay grade of the job that I get. It hasn't affected any sort of entrance into a school or anything like that. It hasn't affected me in the moments that I've had encounters with law enforcement where I was pulled over or, you know, whatever, where I had this sense of fear of what's going to happen to me in this situation. I mean, a number of times, you know, in high school, you know, just being an idiot kid where there was no sense of fear for me of my life is now in danger because this officer is approaching my car. And so I think you said it really well, Kondo. And to me, it's an inspiring statement to say, what can I do? What can I use? How can I use my voice? How can I use my platform to help my friends of color, to help the people around me? And so that's the question that I'm asking myself in this season. Is there something I can do more? Is there some way that I can strategically, compassionately just be doing more with the privilege that I have, that I don't have people coming after me because of the color of my skin. So no, it's something that, sure, at first I think I was defensive and I had a lot of questions about, but it's not something that is bothering me. What is bothering me is it looks like you are gone. Are you back? There you are.
I'm back.
Okay.
Yeah. I departed for a moment.
Don't leave me. Goodness.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I see it as it's unearned privilege. Like you said,
Yeah.
I was born as a white man. I had nothing to do with that. There was no way that I had any control over that. It's just a reality. I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
There's some other things that we look at from a privilege standpoint that for whatever reason, it feels like it's easier to process. I mean, things like socioeconomics. I think we can look at socioeconomic realities and just see that someone who comes from more may have more opportunities afforded to them. Now, it doesn't mean people from a lower socioeconomic don't work hard and don't get opportunities, but it's just the path is easier. I know we've seen lots of studies of what it means between being a man and a woman, especially in the workforce, and some of the discrepancies that come there. You know, there's just, it feels like there's a long list of things that we can look at when it comes to privilege that we go, oh yeah, that makes sense. But for this one, it raises up a lot of personal feelings that I feel like people get defensive. And yet I think if we could be honest with the moment and use our platforms and our influence to help our friends.
Yeah.
I think that's the way to use that privilege well.
Yeah. And again, that's the beauty of this conversation we're having. That's some of the messiness. And for those of you engaging, gosh, cannot thank you enough for that. But that's the difficulty. You know, when I say law enforcement, when I say Black lives, when I say white privilege, when I say Democrat, when I say Republican, to me, it's really interesting that I just want us to be very careful that we don't take phrases and use them to dehumanize. No, let's talk about Matt Deuel. Let's talk about Sheriff Kyle Dukes. Let's talk about George Floyd. Um, and I do appreciate the speaking their names. And so man, I appreciate you even just delving into some of that, and love the fact that even in the midst of all of this, you know, um, man, there is just space to speak and to humanize and to talk about the different individuals and the different the different stories. You know, yeah, I can't thank you enough, Matt, for being willing to stay in the mess, and to to be willing to listen. And I pray that we will start with compassion and feel for human beings long before we argue for a phrase, or long before we argue against a political side,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we will feel for human beings. Um, and again, the thing I would continue to encourage is talk to and listen to human beings, like to people. Um, and that's been, I thank you so much, Matt, for being one of those people that I can just ask questions to you and tell me what this is like, and tell me what this feels like. And I can't encourage that enough, um, for all of us. If you know have any opportunity to talk to a law enforcement officer and to
Right.
humanize them, if you have any opportunity to talk to a Black person and just say, tell me about your experience, before we start arguing about, well, does that apply to everybody? Nothing applies equally to everybody. Um, so um, so even if we say there's a disproportionate amount of this, even within that, there are nuances and there are stories that we want to enter in by talking to people and having conversations with people. And I think that's been one of the concerns for me is, man, is there that growing willingness for us to refuse to do the camps, to do the sides, and to do the eyeballs, you know, and you talk to me, tell me more about, you know, you. I think we do too much of the CNN and the Fox, you know, the left and the right, you know, the kind of the large categories. And so for those of you who are engaging, I cannot thank you enough for being willing to have these hard conversations, you know. Um, and yeah, gosh, you know, like my brother Ed, who is on this thread, man, I hope you and I can sit down like soon and just process, because man, I love your mind. I love the way you think. And we have to continue to be willing to have these hard conversations. And please understand, hard conversations also means disagreeing and saying, we disagree so passionately, I'm not going anywhere. I can
Yeah.
still be for you, even
Yeah.
though we disagree. I can still attempt to put myself in your shoes emotionally, even though we disagree. That's the church, man. Are you on this side or you this side? Are you friend or foe?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and like what we're talking about at church on Sunday, the problem with that is, even if you decide somebody's foe, Jesus would say, well, be foe your foes, right? I mean, he said, love your enemy anyway, right? So
Right.
I think to us, man, as a church, as people, getting away from the sides and the categories and the lumping in, and doing more of
Yeah.
talking to each other. Help me understand. Help me understand. Help me understand. And what we're saying is, right now there's a large population of people of color who are saying, man, we are hurting a lot. And there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, help us to understand. That is not a sellout to you, Matt, as a white man.
Mm.
That is not a disregard of your pain. That
Yeah.
is not to say you don't experience your own versions of hurt or discrimination, or, you know, if you and I on the playground, I'll probably be picked before you, you know, in a basketball game, whatever, you know,
Yeah.
that is a silly extreme. And
Yeah.
I know, you know, that I'm, you know, but that is not a disregard. I'm not disregarding my own pain when
Yeah.
I sit with my wife as she has migraines, and I've never had one in my life. Or
Mm,
your migraines, where you think I don't have knee pain. No, my knee pain is not invalidated. I'm
right.
just sitting with you right now because your migraine has you on the ground.
Yeah.
And um, does it justify if you start throwing stuff or you start cussing no, it doesn't justify it at all.
Yeah.
But I still want to sit down with you in your pain as an individual, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah. No, and I saw Joretta asked, how can we practically break this down in Warsaw? What does this mean? And I think it's a great question. And I think you're speaking to some of that, because the reality for us in Warsaw is we are a predominantly white community. And yet we're saying, hey, get together, have conversations. And so what does that mean? Well, we have a growing Hispanic community. We have an Indian community. There are people of color here in this community. And so I would say to what you're saying, Kondo, is if we have the opportunity to have conversations with people of color, that is what we should be doing. We should be doing that. But I would say equally, if you are processing these conversations and you're on social media and you're seeing that someone across town from you just has an opposing view and you both happen to be white, have a conversation, because
yeah,
the moment that we can get off of Facebook, social media, whatever, and we can get face to face and we can say, why do you think this? Why politically are you motivated this way? What part of this can you help me understand? And I just can't think of many situations in my life where I walk away from someone and didn't feel like, wow, I'm just so glad I did that. I know them now more as a person. I understand the way. I may not agree with some of what we're walking away from, but I understand how they got to this place, or their perspective, or the experience in their life that brought them to feel this way about A, B, C, D, whatever the case may be. So I would say, Joretta, to all of us, this idea of getting together and talking is so huge, regardless of the color of our skin. But even more so if we can have conversations with our friends of color and just ask, tell me about your life. Tell me how this is hitting you. Tell me how you're processing this. And don't be opposed to just argue, but to listen. I think that's huge, huge progress.
yeah, man, amen to that. And it strangely reminds me of someone who I'm going to talk to here in a second as we close, who I'm so thankful he did not stay posting on Heaven's social media page about those dumb humans who continue to, ride in the pain of the messes that they've made themselves, that he did that, right? He says, you know what? I'm going to come down, right? And
Mm,
this is the gospel. It's
yeah.
Jesus saying, you know what? I'm going to come down and we're going to look at each other face to face. And I'm going to walk with you and I'm going to talk with you. And anything that pulls us away from that, Jesus's whole message is like, I want to come closer and man, step into your experiences a little more, understand you a little bit better. Anything that is like stay on opposite sides and just yell at each other is just not of of Christ. And so as Christ followers in particular, we've got to constantly be figuring out how do we close the distance? How do we get in the same space? And how do we look at each other, humanize each other? Jesus didn't just humanize us. Again, he humanized himself, you
Mm,
know, in order to enter in to our humanity. When we start to dehumanize and start to categorize and we start to, gosh, man, how can we heal? Jesus gave a great solution for that, how that happens, and that's stepping into each other's spaces and having these conversations um, with with each other, carrying each other's burdens. So, Matt, I'm thankful for you. Y'all, thank you for engaging. Gosh,
mhm.
it's just a beautiful thing to see. I look forward to going back and reading through some of what you all have said, because I'm not always that great at multitasking. But thank you for being a part of this conversation. Thanks for not quitting
Yeah.
um, on the journey to healing, on the journey to better. I'm telling you, this one's different, and I believe the Lord's going to give us some great opportunities to figure some things out in, in his name. So, Father, I thank you so much for who you are. And I thank you so much for allowing us to have these conversations. I thank you for uh, every single person who's engaging and every single person who is just passionate and humbly longing to see better in this world. And I just pray that you will bless the efforts. I pray, Lord, that you would destroy again the dividing walls of hostility that Jesus came to just demolish. And if the walls are down, we get to cross the street and we get to talk to each other and we get to engage each other. We get to listen to each other's pain without defensiveness. We get to humbly interact. We pray for Rayshad Brooks' family, even as they grieve. We pray for him as an individual and his family as people who are hurting right now. We pray for justice for Officer Rolfe. And that is my plea, God, that you would bring justice, not an emotional verdict, not a vindictive verdict, not a pandering verdict, but justice. I pray this man will get what is right, not what certain people think will send the right message. So again, we pray for him as an individual, that you would meet him even in this difficult time for him. Help us to love even the people we are mad at. Help us to love even the the situation that hurts us. Help us to still be willing to enter in for the sake of loving people well. So thanks for this conversation. Thank you for what you're doing. We refuse to quit, just as Jesus refused to quit on us. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
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 God bless everyone. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.